ladies and gentlemen, this is work in progress. This is the topic that I'm pursuing for my doctoral study. I should think I'm about 60-65% into it. I should be home and dry by the end of this year. That's the topic. Perhaps to give it a good foundation, Setswana is one of the official languages of South Africa. It's one of the 9 Black South African languages. Okay, let me show you what is that I'm going to be covering. The introduction, which covers background, aims, rationale, hypothesis, definition of key concept. Then I'll touch my methodology and respondents. Then I'll get to the survey itself, which I've split into 2 areas, which is the pilot study that I did before I took the main study. And then I will end with the contributory remarks. Excuse me. Now, it is estimated that in South Africa has got 25 languages that are spoken. It's just that out of those 25 and probably more, only 11 have been accorded the official status. 9 are Black African, 1 is English, which is Germanic, and the other one is Afrikaans, which, as you know, has its roots in Dutch and German. Now, the role of English in the South African community. It serves as a lingua franca in inter-ethnic communication, and that cuts across the rest of South Africa, and especially amongst people who are middle class and above. I mean, it's very interesting. You find people who speak the same language just because they occupy certain positions in life. They tend to speak English even if they have a common language. It's because of what English represents. It's the language of the elite, power, and privilege. So the more you speak it, the more people think you are an elite. Thirdly, it is a means to achieve unlimited upward social mobility. That's how, it's not, whether it's perceived or real, that's how people view English. Now, Afrikaans from 1925, it was an official language of South Africa, and it gained momentum from 1948 when the National Party came into office. And just a little bit background, the history of Afrikaans. Since 1948, a lot of resources were poured into it. So much so that after 15 years, in the mid-60s, it was almost at par with English. So it's quite a historically very, very powerful South African English. But then something happened after 1994. It started seeing a decline in popularity and status. People who speak Afrikaans today, I mean, during my day when I was in school, Afrikaans was a compulsory subject. It's no longer a compulsory subject. I mean, people who are in their late teens, some of them don't speak a word of Afrikaans. Now, let's talk about Black South African languages, because my study really is based on one of them. They remain on the margins, and that's what Kamangamalu has found out, that they remain on the margins of power and used mainly as vehicles of transmitting cultural heritage, as was the case before 1994. So not much has changed when it comes to African languages. Now, some of the people have done some work on this area that I'm about to enter. Bayes Cotton says that, or suggests that English symbolizes membership of the elite, educated, the powerful. The Black South African languages of vernacular, people use them or they see them as important for group membership. Professor de Klerk suggests that many speakers of Black South African languages regard them as worthless, which is a very strong word. They regard them as worthless because of their financial, functional limitation. Now that's where my study emanates from. When I saw this, when I read this, I said, really? Are they worthless? That's when I decided to try and pursue an academic study on this. Now, Black South Africans have a positive attitude towards English because they associate it with elitism, education, and power, which is a point that I've covered. And finally, they only have a positive attitude towards Black South African language when it comes to group cohesion and identity. Further notes on that is that Black South Africans believe that their languages are a barrier, or may be a barrier to job opportunities, and are inferior, in quotes, because it's a perception, are inferior to English because the latter enjoys an international status. Now, I've got two hypotheses for my study. The only difference between the first one and the second one lies in mobility and participation, because there's something called language, language participation and language mobility. It's possible that one may have, let's take Japanese for instance. Japanese is quite, in terms of Japan, the participation is very high. The mobility is very high within Japan, but outside Japan it doesn't have mobility, it doesn't have a lot of participation. But if you look at a language like English, maybe not in France, maybe it's not that mobile in France, but internationally English and French would be very, very mobile languages. So I just wanted to see if the two are necessarily going to hold, or one will hold, the other one won't, or both of them won't. That's why I decided to split the hypothesis. Now, language attitude, perhaps before I get to what my definition for language attitude is, I need to talk about the variables or the components of attitude as a social psychology concept. Attitude has got three components. It's got belief, it's got emotion, it's got behavior. Now, if you change one of those three, you are likely to change someone's attitude. Now, as it applies to language, I've used the definition from Ryan, Giles, and Sebastian. Any affective, cognitive, or behavioral index of evaluating reactions towards different language varieties or their speakers. Simply put, attitude, people hold attitude towards something we call an attitude object. A laptop could be an attitude object. A table could be an attitude object. Even abstracts like abortion, it could be an attitude object. That's why you find some people doing, or what you call it, industrial action to show how opposed they are to abortion. Some would say would support it, others won't. So abortion becomes an attitude object. In linguistics, language becomes an attitude object. Either the language itself, the people who speak it, or both. Now, let me move to the methodology that I have used. I'm using something called the Likert scale type questionnaire, and the number of people that so far I have collected data from are 95. And all 95 of these are undergraduate students. The reason why I have only covered undergraduate students for purposes of this presentation is because I am yet to finalize data collection amongst postgrads, that is B.Tech right up to D.Tech. So because my national diploma is complete, I can use it for purposes of this presentation. Now, in my questionnaire, I have 16 belief statements that I ask people to tell me whether they strongly agree on the one extreme and strongly disagree on the other. And then for my quantitative data, I've used 3 open questions as well as interviews. Now, this questionnaire was piloted and validated amongst one campus, because TUT has got various campuses. In Pretoria alone, it's got 5 campuses. So I've used all 5, but I've singled one for purposes of validating my questionnaire. And by validating, I mean to check whether if I ask what, I don't get a why answer. If I ask what, I don't get how. So I have validated it. Now, I've conducted interviews from that 95 with 22 participants, 11 female, 11 females. How I selected them, it depended on their score from the questionnaire. So by all means, I try to get people who are extremely negative, people who are extremely positive, and people who are in the middle, so that I get a balanced view. Sample population, I went onto the field, on campus. I asked people, because it's a study on opinions, I asked people, are you Setswana-speaking? And those who said, yes, I am, I had no reason to doubt if they were not. They were registered for any program, 5 faculties. Those are the campuses around Pretoria. And I didn't really look at whether they studied Setswana up to grade 12 or not. For me, that was immaterial because I am looking for people who self-declare themselves as speakers of the language or who identify with Setswana as a cultural group. The age range, 18 to 35, and I use the stratified random sampling so that I can balance the numbers. Further, yes, so I excluded the arts campus because the risk with bumping into someone whom I had used for my pilot was high. So I decided of the 5 campuses, I'm going to exclude the arts campus. Now I've got 47, you see the numbers are quite balanced, 47, 48, and as you will see, a majority of the students range from 18 up to 25. I only had one student who is aged above 26, and this student has been in the system for some time, like 5 years or so.
A very bad student.
Come again?
A very bad student.
Yeah, they've been breaking quite a lot. Yeah, like I explained, for the postgrads, I'm still collecting data. So far, I only have 16, 24 to go because I need to have like 30% of the population being representative of postgraduate students. Now, what I decided to do is I have clustered the faculties. I've got 3 faculties. As you will see, Human and Management Sciences, there's no such a faculty, it's my own creation. I have taken students from Humanities who are doing largely social sciences and management sciences. Science, engineering, and technology, they go together. Those are the faculties below, and economics and finance. So those are the figures. Pilot study done, questionnaire, I got 27, and the majority of them were 14 in that age group, which is consistent with the student population of university. That is the average age of people who are doing undergraduate. I will quickly go to my findings. Now, these are the elicitation items or belief statements that I put across. I decided not to go with a long questionnaire, rather to have fewer and more tighter elicitation items. Now, I have 8 on this page, I have 8 on the other page. Now, see, these are some of the things, or these are the statements that I ask students to tell me whether they strongly agree, whether they strongly disagree. Now, to tell you, to indicate to you where the majority or where the aggregate decision was or opinion was, I've decided to put in the mean. Now, can I explain the mean? Now, my mean, like a type scale, would have items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if someone gives you a strongly agree to a positive statement, that's a 5. Similarly, if someone gives you a strongly disagree to a negative statement, that also gets a 5. Now, the closer you are to a 5, it's the more positive the group was on a particular elicitation item. Now, if you look at the first one, which scores very highly, it's more than 4, closer to 5. It means a majority or the average opinion there is that they strongly agree. Parents who speak Setswana have to uphold the use of language by speaking to your children at home. A lot of people agree that that should be the case, and it also came out in the interviews. Now let's look at perhaps number 3, which is one of the lowest. It's 2.7. Studying Setswana up to grade 12 is enough. Now a lot of people say there is no need to study Setswana beyond grade 12, which is very interesting. The rest of them, as you will see, they are around 3, between 3 and 4, which means people are more positive as opposed to negative. Okay? The next slide, even on this slide as well, on average, you have around 3, 4, except for number 13. And number 13 is quite interesting because the current Minister of Higher Education suggests that students who do not have an African language on their grade 12 certificate must be made to study a module before they leave university. So I decided to check whether the people who are already in university agree with it. And I asked them, should Setswana speakers who study university cannot read the language should be made to do it before they graduate? And 2.8, which is below 3. So that tells you that a lot of students who are currently in the system are saying it's not a good idea. All right. Let me get to the interviews. I will get back to how I split the enlistation items later. This is the profile of my participants. As you will see, a majority of them have studied Setswana up to grade 12. That's 15. 3 of them have studied the language even at university. They are language practice students. Only 4 have not studied the language that well. I mean, 1 studied it only in grade 8 because they moved towns. The other one, at the bottom, this guy did not study it at all. So you would say a majority of the people that I interviewed have at least studied it at grade 12 and above. Now, these are the questions that I put to them. The first question that I put to them was that in South Africa, there are people who are taught in Afrikaans from grade 1. Some even do degrees at university in Afrikaans. Now, because they are taught English as a medium of communication, they are able to work not only in South Africa, but even abroad. I mean, we've got large people who are Afrikaans speaking who live in Perth, Australia, who live in London, UK. These are people these are graduates of University of Pretoria, Stellenbosch. They are able to work because they can speak English. So that is what I put to them to say, should the same happen to Setswana, what would be the chances of people finding employment? And this is what I got. Those who said it's going to be easy, it's 15 out of 22, which accounts for 68.2%. Now, because this is qualitative, for purpose of this exercise, I just singled out the most common reason for why they believe it's going to be easy. And they said to me, the ability to speak English is enough to secure employment, meaning you do not need necessarily to study in English. So one participant even told me that in South Africa we have people who are, who studied medicine in Cuba, in Spanish, but they are able to do a positive diagnosis. So you don't necessarily need to study in English for you to know or to detect flu in a person. As long as you have another language like English for you to communicate to the patient what's wrong with them, that is what is important. And that reason came out very clearly. Now those who said it's going to be difficult, and I really pushed them to want to find why are they so convinced that it's going to be difficult. And they told me that lack of proficiency in English, if you do not study in the medium of English, there is in no way that you will have adequate proficiency in it. They are convinced it has to be done through the medium of English for your English to be at a particular level. It's only 7 or 32% of my population. Now the second question, I only have 5 questions that I posed to them. And this one is just based on my opinion. I didn't read it in any of the previous studies. Younger generation, they speak less Setswana than older generations. And I asked them, should something be done to ensure that the language eventually wouldn't die? And those who said do something, also in the majority, there were 20 of them, and F there would be females and 9 males. And in fact, almost all of them told me that the fault lies with adults. Parents do not speak African languages to their children. If they spoke more, you would not see this negative attitude towards African languages. So they emphasize that at least in the home, parents should speak the native to their children. Now, those who said don't do anything, there were only 2 males who were adamant that nothing should be done. They told me language death is a natural process. If it's bound to die, so be it. The third question that I put to them was, what was the understanding of language development? The reason why I asked this question is because in the questionnaire, there was a question that wanted understanding of language development. And when I went through their responses, I got a sense that people did not know what language development was. They were shooting from the hip. So I was just to be sure. I was surprised to learn that 18 of them actually knew. I mean, they used words like improve, improve how people speak it, make, translate it more. See all the verbs that illustrate to a researcher that these people understand what they are talking about. Now, those who didn't understand, who were like vague, they provided me with vague answers. There were only 4 of them. The second last one, I asked them about how they will behave as parents. I asked them if they were to marry someone who is not a Setswana speaker, would they insist or would they not insist that their kids be brought up speaking Setswana in the home? And those who said they would insist were 18, which is quite high. And they said they were convinced that language is not only about communications, about one's culture, it's about one's identity. They said, if we don't speak our language to them, then who are we? And those who said, no, I would not insist. If my child starts a conversation in English, that's how the conversation will go. So they said they don't have a problem with children dictating the language policy inside the house. The last question that I put to them was, should universities play a role in development of Black South African languages? And they said 19 of them were adamant that yes. And some of the reasons that they provided, in fact, they told me that they were struggling. They said, they had to fight to go through first year, not because they are dumb, but because they did not understand a lot of concepts in economics, in technology. But once they got to understand the terminology, then they were able to cope with university study. But they said for those who are entering university and not coming from suburban schools, they could be assisted by things like study guides. You provide translation. Some even said at UNISA, you receive a question paper in English and in Afrikaans. You are not forced to answer in Afrikaans, but if you understand Afrikaans, you stand a better chance because then you understand what the question wants, even if you answer in English. They said, why can't one University of Technology do the same? Now, those who said it shouldn't play any role, 3 males said no. Our universities have international students, so English should be the only language used. When I push them to say, when you avail South African languages at university, you are not saying, you're not keeping international students out. Because then because one guy said to me, what about Zambian students? I said, okay, by the same token, if you are in Zambia, and then the University of Zambia provides information in Bemba, would you say the Zambian university is discriminating against you? He said, yes. I said, in fact, the world that he lives in, everything should be fair. And as far as I'm aware, life is never fair. Okay, the illustration items that I had, those 60, I decided to break them down into 3 types. So the first type, which only has 4, it's language promotion, propagation, transfer, and cultural identity. And if you look at all the illustration items that I have there, they have something to do with promoting language. And the mean score that I got there was 4.4, which is, a lot of people are positive when it comes to language promotion. Now, if you look at the second one, which is uses Setswana for formal functions, here I have more, I've got 9. The reason why the distribution is not equal, it's because this is the crux of my study. This is the crux. How is language, remember the hypothesis that I'm looking for or that I'm pursuing has to do with mobility and has to do with participation. So if a language is used in formal settings, it has got mobility. It has got participation. So those are the elicitation items. If you look at the mean, I beg your pardon, the mean is 3.4. So it doesn't score as highly as language propagation. And if you look at the last type, which is language prestige, it only has 3 because I wanted to see whether there are any discrepancies between the first one, the first type, the second type, and the third type, or whether there are any trends emerging from the middle one. Is there evidence from the first type and the third type supporting the middle one? and there I got 3.4 as a main score. The one that really surprised me was number 12. I asked them, a university graduate who majored in Setswana is equally educated as others with the same level of qualification, and a lot of them said yes. The reason why I put it there is because when I was still an undergraduate student, the perception was if you studied humanities, if you studied language, you were not on the same level as people who were studying engineering, were studying chemistry. You know, your degree was like inferior. So I just wanted to clear it with them, and they said that's not. And then number 9, if you look at it, it's about mixing languages. I asked them, does it have anything to do with being educated? And they said, no, it's just for convenience. If I'm talking to you and I don't have a Zulu word, I can throw in an English word. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just got nothing to do with how educated I appear. Now, these are my concluding remarks, and these are based on the general, what I got from the elicitation items and what I got from qualitative data. They believe that competence in English translates into being knowledgeable and marketable. Some of them even told me that employers are not looking for people who know what they do. They are looking for people who are able to speak English well. So it wouldn't matter whether you are a sharp engineer. If you cannot speak English very well in a boardroom, chances of you securing employment are minimized. I've touched on that one. And some told me that it's inconceivable that you could develop any African language to be used at university. It's inconceivable. It's impossible. They threw, especially those who are doing ICT, they were asking me, what is this term in Setswana? What is that term? I said, well, I don't know at this stage, but it does not mean people like you cannot come to the party and suggest several terms to be used. Because as area specialists, you are the ones who are best placed to come with that new terminology. Thirdly, they told me, generally what I got was that their language has a role in society, but may be a barrier to socioeconomic advancement. I'm wrapping up. Early indications show at this stage, early indications are that both the hypotheses will hold that their language, they have positive attitude towards it, but they regard it as quite limiting when it comes to participation and mobility in the wider South African population. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Merci.